introduced everybody who had any connection at all with the show, calling them all by first name. He didn't even have to stop and think who was who. Okay? Truly amazing. Truly amazing.
You know, it's also amazing, Mark. I never watched the show.
I know. Well, but that's your choice.
I know.
That's why, as usual, I'm doing most of the talking.
Well, in this case you are, because you obviously enjoy the show a lot.
There wasn't a show that went by when I didn't learn something. And that's the whole thing. You know, I used to use humor in my classroom. Not to break tension so much, but it's one surefire way of teaching a point. Okay? If you can teach a point and use humor, it's something that your students are going to remember. Give you an example. 5-6 years ago, my wife had brain surgery. She had 3 aneurysms at North Shore Hospital here on Long Island. And I happened to be in the elevator one day, and a young girl looked at me and said, "You're a teacher, aren't you?" I said, "Yes." She said, and she mentioned the school, and she said she was in one of my classes, and she said, "You can do it." For a whole year, that was my theme with my class, our mantra. Okay, that was from Adam Sandler's The Waterboy. And my younger daughter, Robin, and I used to joke about this all the time. She said, "That's what I remember about your class." She said, "You always used to tell us that we could do it. You could do it." Okay? Now, that's using humor, and it got my point across. Okay? Jon Stewart did that every single day, 4 nights a week. Okay? And the fact that news commentators, news programs, spending valuable time bidding him a fond farewell and talking about his final show, shows you the influence that this man has had on his craft and on disseminating news to a generation of millennials.
Now, do you feel he was factual?
Oh, yeah. When he made a mistake, he admitted it. But he had a staff who double and triple checked everything. And the most amazing thing, as I said before, like Warner Wolf, when he was making a point in sports, and Warner Wolf would say, "Let's go to the videotape." He would show a political figure saying something, and then he would run a videotape of them saying the complete opposite, yet they swore they never said that before. Well, there it is in black and white. It's kind of hard to lie, you know, when you're watching something like that right in front of you. Okay, and he did this day after day. Yes, he delivered the punchlines, but he had a staff who would write it. He had none of these, you know, comedy shows, you know, are without people who factually check everything they say. And when Jon Stewart makes a mistake, he used to come on and say, "Hey, you know, I made a fool of myself." And that's another thing to admire about him. So, I mean,
well,
I'm going to miss him.
I don't know the show, so I can't say much, but a lot of things can be taken out of context to make him funny, to make him apply to what you wanted to apply to. I'm not saying he did. As I said, I never watched the show.
Well, then you really can't say, because what he did was, I'm telling you what he did. He would show John McCain or Donald Rumsfeld or George Bush in a recent, when I say recent, when these people were in the news every day, especially during the Bush presidency, okay? And he would say something. And then Jon Stewart would go back 2, 3, 4 years and show George Bush saying something totally contradictory. In fact, on one of his shows, it wasn't the last show, might have been this week, however, he had Governor George Bush debating President George Bush. He put them up simultaneously next to each other, and Governor Bush would say something, and then President Bush would say something contradictory, or vice versa. Okay? So it was not taken out of context, trust me. And I wouldn't be talking like this if I wasn't such a staunch supporter and I watched the show all the time.
I know you are. That's why, you can be a little bit too loyal sometimes to somebody, not to see the bad parts of him. I'm not saying there are. And if anybody's watched the show and would like to tell us what they thought of the show, I'd appreciate a call. As I said, I've never really watched the show, so it's hard for me to make any comments.
Remember, the number is 646-595-3275. And while you're digesting some of the things that I've said, I think we ought to digress a little bit and talk about that big debate yesterday. God bless cable news. They did a breakdown on how much time almost every candidate got a chance to speak. The Donald, of course, spoke for more than 10 minutes. He was the number one speaker. But the average was a little over 6 minutes for almost all of them. Okay. Rand Paul, I think, spoke for only 4 minutes total. They all had shining moments and they all had embarrassing moments. If you saw the beginning of the debate, right away Megyn Kelly put a question to Donald Trump about his treatment of women. And, he didn't apologize, but these were certainly things that he said. And his excuse, of course, was that, I can't always be politically correct. The thing is, Donald Trump is never politically correct. Okay, Donald Trump just says what he wants to say, and that's it.
And that's why people like him right now.
Well, I don't think there were too many women out there that liked what he had to say at the beginning of the debate.
But I heard women today being interviewed, and they said that they're still going to vote for him.
Well, as is their prerogative, but he didn't address women's issues. He didn't address the discrepancy in income between the haves and the have-nots.
He couldn't because he wasn't asked. There was nothing asked about those questions. There's no questions about that. Mark, it was a very limited, very pointed...
Well, you know why there weren't questions about that? What channel was it on? What network?
I know, so don't say they didn't talk about it. They were never asked.
Fox didn't even bring it up. You're blaming
the politicians for what Fox didn't do.
Well, I'm blaming, those who collected the questions. You can't tell me that there wasn't one question on income inequality, on women's health. All right, yet Fox News chose not to discuss these things. Okay?
But you can't blame the politicians for that.
But they had a chance while they were answering a question to bring something up. I mean, they certainly had a chance when they were answering a question to turn to one of the other people on stage and say something denigrating about them or to take issue. You got the exchange between Christie and Rand Paul, for one. Donald Trump took issue with a few people, but that was expected. Marco Rubio, he got an applause when he said Hillary Clinton shouldn't lecture me on what it's like to live from paycheck to paycheck. And then he started going into his whole family background. But I wonder if he did his research, because Hillary Clinton's mother was a maid. She used to clean hotel rooms. Hillary Clinton didn't come from money. She was brilliant. She won scholarships to Wellesley and to Yale. Okay? And as far as Rubio owing $100,000, I remember about 5 years ago, President Obama said that he and the First Lady just finished paying off their college loans, and he was already pushing 50. Rubio's only in his late 30s. Okay? Just finished paying off his college loans. Okay? And believe me, he had plenty of grants. And he was, as I said, in his mid to late 40s, and he and the First Lady just finished paying off their college loans. Okay? So, and then Rubio also put his foot in his mouth when he said that in the one time I heard them talk about the women's right to choose, all right, even if the woman's life was at stake or if she was raped, he didn't believe that she should be allowed to have an abortion. If you're hoping to be the Republican nominee, women make up the majority of the people who vote in this country. Okay, you're not certainly helping yourself when you take a stand like that.
That is true. That is true. But I'll tell you, not that many of these candidates made themselves look good. What's the guy from Ohio?
Kasich. I was also very impressed with him.
Yeah, he was. He seemed good.
However, I have to tell you, since my daughter lives in Ohio, that like Scott Walker, he took on the unions, and it's not just him. Okay, governors today are union busters. Okay, and I add Andrew Cuomo into that mix. Okay, we all know about Chris Christie and Rick Perry and Jeb Bush and Scott Walker, okay, because, municipal unions have negotiated pension contracts, and then what happens is they freeze the hiring of municipal workers, and they tell you, well, you could be hired as a contract worker. Now, a contract worker simply means that they pay you by the day. When you don't work, you don't get paid. You don't get any sick leave. You don't contribute into a pension system. And when you don't contribute into a pension system, eventually the union goes broke. You're forcing the union to renegotiate pension contracts that have been guaranteed. Okay? Now, what's wrong with this picture? Now, I understand people who don't belong to a union. I mean, people who work for IBM or one of the .com companies that didn't go belly up, they make six figures easily. The average municipal employee is lucky if they ever reach $100,000. In my 34 years as a teacher, I never earned $100,000. Never. Okay?
What's the maximum pay of a teacher now?
Depends where you teach.
In New York City.
A master's plus 60. You could earn over about $115,000.
Okay, now you can. When you were there, how many years ago did you retire?
I'm retired 12 years, 13 years.
Things have changed since then.
You're talking about what you don't know. I know that. I understand that. Okay?
What are you talking about what I don't know about? I know things have changed, and
listen, I voted on... don't get me started, okay?
What?
Don't get me started.
Get you started? I'm sorry, Mark. I'm not getting you started on anything. Don't get aggravated. Just say what you want to say. That's the end of it.
All I'm saying is that the average governor today, and I can understand where they're coming from, they have to cut corners, and the easiest way to cut corners is to go after the unions. Okay? Unions have become very powerful.